A mother in Danville, Ohio, watched her 19-year-old son spend $3,000 of graduation money on rifles, body armor, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. The purchases came fast, one after another, and the online messages he refused to explain worried her more than the guns. On June 10, 2026, she picked up the phone and called the local police. She thought she was reporting a troubled teenager. Instead, she handed the FBI the thread that would unravel a plot to kill the President of the United States, with only 4 days left on the clock. Her son was Tyson Proper, and by the end of that week, 7 other men across 4 states would be pulled into the same investigation, none of them aware that federal agents were already reading their conversations. Local officers in Danville took the call seriously and moved quickly. Within hours, the information climbed from a small-town department to federal investigators who recognized the pattern for what it was. Proper was arrested that same day, June 10th, before he could travel anywhere or meet anyone. The sped mattered. Agents had learned of an active threat aimed at a public event in Washington, and now they held a name, an address, and a suspect in custody. But one arrest rarely closes a case like this. The messages on Proper's phone pointed outward, toward other men, other states, and a coordinated timeline that was still counting down. Investigators understood they were not looking at a lone teenager with a grudge. They were looking at the visible edge of something organized, and they had days, not weeks, to find the rest of it. On June 11th, FBI agents and local police executed a search warrant at Proper's home. Inside, they catalogued body armor, a rifle, a shotgun, and thousands of rounds of ammunition, the exact inventory a person assembles when they intend to use it. The purchases his mother had flagged now had a physical shape, laid out across evidence tables. Every item confirmed that the online talk had crossed into preparation. And each piece raised the same question for investigators: preparation for what and with whom? Weapons alone told part of the story, but the phone told the rest. Encrypted messages linked Proper to a group planning something far larger than any single shooter could carry out. That group had a meeting point, a schedule, and a target already chosen. The search had answered one question and opened a dozen more. Their conversations lived on Signal, an encrypted messaging app the group trusted to keep their words hidden. Investigators identified at least 23 users inside that chat, discussing a mass casualty attack in plain terms. This was the machinery behind the gear. Men in different states, coordinating rides, assigning roles, and setting deadlines through their phones. Some handled logistics. Others were recruited to shoot. At least one was designated to operate a drone. That chat gave the plot a structure a warehouse of weapons never could, and it revealed how far the planning had gone. What none of the 23 understood was that their private channel was no longer private. Agents had found a way inside, and every message about timing, travel, and targets was being read as it arrived. The plotters kept typing. The FBI kept watching. The target was one of the most protected addresses on Earth. A combat sports event, billed as UFC Freedom 250, had been scheduled for the White House South Lawn on June 14, 2026, the 80th birthday of President Donald Trump. Thousands of spectators, cameras, and political figures were expected in one open outdoor space. For anyone planning violence, the appeal was obvious. A crowd, a date fixed months in advance, and a guest list that read like a map of American leadership. The group had chosen their moment with care. They knew when the event would happen and where the people they wanted to reach would be standing. Their problem was mechanical. That open ground is not easy to attack from outside, which is why the plan they built was more elaborate than any single gunman could manage. Investigators described a 2-part design. The first part involved remote-controlled drones intended to carry explosives over the security perimeter and force people out of cover. A second part placed shooters in position to fire on anyone driven into the open. Drones to flush the crowd, snipers to finish it. On paper, it was built to bypass defenses that assume a threat comes from a person walking through a gate. What agents actually recovered matters, because the distinction is important. No armed drones were ever seized, and none were launched. That aerial component existed only in messages and coordination, not in the sky. The plot was stopped in the planning stage, before a single device reached the Capitol. That precision is exactly why the group needed so many people, and why one weak link could bring the entire structure down. The man accused of directing the effort used the alias Shepherd. His real name is Abraham Hermosillo Alvarez, a Mexican national who federal authorities say entered the United States on a visitor visa that expired in December 2001, more than 20 years before the plot took shape. According to the government, he pushed the group to make the attack, in his words, as deadly as we can get. He assigned tasks, moved money, and treated the operation like a project with milestones. And he did all of it inside the same signal chat that agents had already compromised, which meant his instructions to escalate were landing in front of the very people working to stop him. The mastermind believed he was steering a secret plan. Every message he sent became part of the case file agents were building against him. Money moved through the group in small, traceable amounts. Alvarez handed $1,200 in cash to a man named Jordan Rinker, meant to be distributed as gas money and payments to other conspirators. Rinker then sent exactly $100 over Cash App to Brian Omar Roa in California to fund a cross-country drive to collect the group's designated drone operator. Rinker also hand-delivered a shotgun to Alvarez in Omaha. These were not large sums. $100 for gas, a few hundred more spread across states, the kind of transactions that vanish in ordinary bank records. But investigators reading the chat knew what each payment was for. Every transfer matched a message, and every message matched a role. The financial trail turned scattered errands into evidence of a single coordinated plan, and it tied men who had never met into one conspiracy. The commitment inside the group did not break when the arrests began. When Tyson Proper stopped answering his messages, the others did not know he was in custody. One recruit, a 21-year-old using the alias Viper of the SOG, whose real name is Chandler D. Skaggs, had been brought in as a shooter. Rather than treat the sudden silence as a warning, Skaggs pushed harder. He tried to arrange a new ride to Washington, D.C., determined to reach the event on his own. He believed the mission was still alive and that he could still play his part. What he could not see was that federal agents were tracking his movements the entire time, watching a man drive toward a trap he had built for himself. His persistence became one more entry in the record against him. The reason the plot never left the planning stage comes down to access. Agents were not guessing at the group's intentions. They were reading them. The signal chat that the plotters trusted had become the government's clearest window into the conspiracy, capturing names, dates, travel plans, and the escalating language of men who thought they were speaking in private. Every plan the group made in text became a plan the FBI could counter in the field. Co-conspirators had arranged to travel across state lines and gather in Fredericksburg, Virginia, to stage for the attack. That rendezvous never happened. Arrests began before the group could assemble. And the coordination that made the plot dangerous became the same thing that exposed every member of it. On June 14, 2026, the event proceeded on the White House South Lawn exactly as scheduled. Fighters entered the ring, the crowd filled the grounds, and the president marked his 80th birthday with no security breaches during the event. Most people in attendance had no idea how close the date had come to something else entirely. No drones appeared overhead. No shooters took position. An elaborate plan built across 4 states and 23 phone accounts collapsed into silence, replaced by an ordinary afternoon of sport and celebration. For the public, it was a normal event. For the investigators who had spent that final week racing the clock, it was the quietest possible confirmation that they had won. Nothing happened, which was precisely the point. 2 days after the event, the case moved into the open. On June 16, 2026, the Department of Justice unsealed federal criminal complaints and announced the arrests of 5 initial suspects, spread across California, Missouri, Nebraska, and Ohio. The geography told its own story. This had never been a local threat or a single disturbed individual. It was a network assembled online and stitched together with cash payments and cross-country drives. Prosecutors' complaints laid out the roles agents had watched form in real time, from the mastermind moving money to the recruits preparing to travel. 5 arrests marked the first public accounting, but the investigation was not finished. The chat had named more than 5 people, and prosecutors were still building the full picture of who had done what and how far each man had gone. The full charge arrived on July 9th, 2026, when a federal grand jury in Columbus, Ohio, handed down a 2-count indictment against 8 men. Named in the indictment were Abraham Alvarez, Daniel Eskridge, Jordan Rinker, William Faulkner, Tyson Proper, Brian Roa, Michael Thomas, and Chandler Skaggs. The 2 counts were conspiracy to provide material support to terrorists and conspiracy to commit murder on federal territory. Each carries the possibility of life in prison. 8 men, 4 states, 1 encrypted chat, and a single indictment binding them together. That document turned months of surveillance into a formal case. Converting intercepted messages and traced payments into charges a jury will one day weigh. From the mother's phone call to the grand jury's decision, the entire arc had taken less than a month. The White House has faced threats to its grounds before, though nothing quite like this. Over the decades, the South Lawn has seen breaches that tested the perimeter, from unauthorized aircraft to individuals who slipped past the fence. Those earlier incidents were largely the work of single people acting alone, testing security more than planning a massacre. What separated this case was its scale and its method. A coordinated group, recruited and directed online, designing an attack that combined aerial devices with ground shooters, against a fixed target on a known date. Their tools were modern, their communication encrypted, their ambition beyond anything a lone intruder had attempted, and the defense that stoped it was not a fence or a checkpoint. It was a mother's instinct and a channel the plotters believed was secure. Strip away the drones, the aliases, and the cross-country payments, and the case comes down to a sequence of ordinary decisions. A teenager spent his graduation money where his mother could see it. She trusted her worry enough to make a call. Agents moved in days rather than weeks. And a group that believed encryption, made them invisible, left a written record of every plan they made. Attention stopped the plot targeting one of the most guarded places on Earth, not walls or weapons. That attention came at every level, from a parent to a small-town police desk to the federal agents reading messages the plotters thought no one would ever see. 8 men now face the rest of their lives in prison. The event went on. That birthday passed, and the loudest thing about the whole affair is how quietly it ended.